Security policies are handled uniquely by each organization, and policies across organizations can vary drastically. There are a number of factors that can affect the formation and implementation of security policy across organizations. One factor would include the culture of the organization. For instance, if the culture of one particular organization is to have a detailed account of the flow of information, then strict measures may be incorporated into the security policy. Another factor that would affect security policy would be the industry. For example, the financial services industry will likely have a greater control around data privacy. Similarly, the regulatory environment may affect security policy. For instance, HIPAA guidelines may require health insurance providers to enact a strict security policy. With that having been said, there are several standard policies that every organization should have in order to provide the foundation for its information security program. These are an information security policy, a privacy policy, and an acceptable use policy. The information security policy should have a clear designation of an individual responsible for the ISP. It should also clearly describe security roles and provide a description of the corresponding responsibility. Furthermore, the process and policy exemptions and violations should be explicitly stated. Another type of policy that should be commonly found is a privacy policy. A privacy policy should be published and readily accessible. The privacy policy should also describe how organizations collect, share, and distribute information. Moreover, the privacy policy should be clear for users to understand. This falls back to the ethics of collecting information. Security professionals should aim to make privacy policies as clear and transparent as possible so that no questions linger. Another type of policy that is commonly found is an acceptable use policy. Acceptable use policy describes what personal use, if any, is permitted, prohibits illegal activities, and describes how individuals may use information systems. For example, let's assume an employee at a credit card call center is using the computers to surf the internet on his or her lunch hour. Does the acceptable use policy clearly allow or prohibit this? These policies are among the most common that are found to safeguard information security. These policies should also explain how the organization implements several key principles of information security. The first is known as the principle of least privilege. The principle of least privilege, also known as the principle of minimal privilege or the principle of least authority, requires that in a particular abstraction layer of computing environment, every module, such as a process, a user, or program, depending on the subject, must be able to access only the information and resources that are necessary for its legitimate purposes. For example, the new hire in a marketing department should not have access to employee salary information that is on the HR database, as it is not required for the employee to carry out his or her duties. The principle of separation of duties, also known as segregation of duties, is the concept of having more than one person required to complete a task. This is a form of control intended to prevent fraud and error. For example, if an individual has authority to create accounts in the system, then he or she should not have the ability to perform accounts payable transactions on the system. If this individual is granted permission to do both, the company would be vulnerable to the individual setting up fictitious accounts and then paying those fictitious accounts, with the funds being redirected to the employee. A separation of duty would be effective in this case. For example, the employee may have the authority to set up the account, but only a supervisor may have the authority to set up a payment on the account. Mandatory vacations provide a similar control mechanism, with the intention being that any questionable actions may come to light when the employee is away on vacation. Finally, the practice of a job rotation serves a purpose similar to mandatory vacations. With job rotations, personnel in sensitive positions would not have the ability to cover up fraudulent activities, as their post is changed periodically.